Hello and welcome to another episode of Cyrils Brettspiele durchgespielt. My name is Nils, and today, in a nutshell, Achaia, no idea how you really correctly pronounce this word. However, this is a game about political intrigue and a square box game from RedImp. So what is in the box? And first of all, you have this 12 different locations. By the way, I wanted to show you the insert of the box. How beautiful is that? Wow. So that is a really beautiful box. So, however, you have this 12 different locations. So here's a number in the right upper corner, in this case a 10. And you maybe mentioned this is not English, this is also not German, so this is a Polish version. So therefore, I found barely people who are wanted to try to take a look at this game, or at least playing this game. The artwork is beautiful in my mind. However, I have to admit I played that only once. Therefore, I will not give you a full insight of the game, because that would be unfair to judge about a game I've never really played a lot of. So therefore, I will just show you how it works. It's more like an interesting overview about the game, but not a deep insight, because I cannot really judge on that game. Just to let you know what's going on today. So you also have this House of Orion tile here, and you have a point tracker here. It's called another board tile, or the power track. Each player will have 5 dice. So I presented that here for red. So red 5 dice, 1 disc to indicate the points you have. This power tokens, it's called. Whenever you are controlling a location, you place 1 power token on it. You play that game over 3 rounds. So each round you control that city tile, you get a power token onto it. You also have gold in 3 different, in 1, 3s, and here this gold is worth 5 denotations. This is the first player token. Each player has a screen, so outside it just represents your color. Inside there's a reference, what are all these locations doing here. This is the locations. Then you have marker. These tokens are changing this die limit here. So for an example, you have a die limit of maximum 2 dice right now here. You could change that to 1, or you can change that to 3, or you can change that to none, depending on the number of players and the round you are in. You have 1 neutral die to roll out some random events. You have some so-called usage tokens here to represent that you already used a specific card. Speaking about cards, you have different cards. These are the so-called intrigue cards. So with these intrigue cards, unfortunately I cannot show it to you. They always have an upper thing here or a lower thing, which means either or. You can take one action or the other action from this intrigue cards. They are really super important in the game, because this drives the game along with the locations. So the locations have the symbols on here, so which means you can do something in a location. For an example, in here, let me show you this. This gives you simply gold, or there are some other things. This gives you a court cousin, it's called, so another card you can use. Speaking about court cousins, these are the so-called cousins. So they are court cousins or street cousins. Court cousins are a little bit more powerful than just simply street cards. Cousins. These are characters. These characters represent figures in the ancient world here, and you have them for 1, 2, and 3 marked down, and these representing the turns of the game. You play that game over 3 turns, and in turn 1 you have characters from stage 1, then 2 and 3. The same is here for the so-called event cards. Each player will have an event card on his hand, and also 1, 2 or 3. And these are the so-called action cards. Each player will have 1 action card in his hand, and that is simply saying you pass or you are activated. That's what it in the box, and now let's talk about how this game works. This game is a little bit different, so I will show you how it works when I settle up the table a little bit different. Set up the game could be either making that in numerical order 1, 2, 3, 4 and so forth up to 12, or you can do that randomly to shake out a little bit randomly. This is representing because when you solve these locations later on in the turn, I explain it in a minute when, then you solve it from here to here, so going like this. So if it's random, it shakes up the timing of the events from the different locations. However, and this makes the game a little bit different. These are workers, so dice as workers is not super different. And you place them, but you don't place it on your turn. You place these dice before the first turn. So this is still part of the setup phase. You mentioned here are some dice in it that determines the maximum number of dice each of these locations can have, and so on and so forth. So you're placing these dice here, blah, blah, blah. Things like that, for an example. So now all the dice are placed. Again, I mentioned that before that this game is only played over 3 turns. So on turn 2 you add, or between turn 1 and 2 you add another die, and then between turn 2 and 3 you add the 5th die of each player. You also having in the preparation phase here some numbers on it, and some of these locations will get opened, reopened, allowing more dice and things like that in between these phases, or the so-called preparation phase. In the first round you skip the preparation phase. This is still part of the setup, but between 1 and 2 and 2 and 3 you have this preparation phase where you can place 1 additional die. Then you start the intrigue phase. Over the course of the game you have a bunch of these intrigue cards on your hand. So I had a couple of them here, and during your turn now you start playing these cards here. So you can stop whenever you want playing these cards, but this is the main mechanic of the game. So you have cards on your hand and you use them to manipulate dice, turning them or sometimes changing the location. You also could bribe these characters here. This character is now in phase 1. It costs you $1 to bribe them, and then you can take the effect. When you do that, you put this usage token on it to indicate he was already used, and if someone else wanted to use him, it could get more expensive. Or simply when you don't have any things you wanted to do, then you simply pass and you become the next first player. That is the intrigue phase. You're fighting with these cards, and it's a blood fight. So everybody against the other ones, so it's a one can get everything. Then you're coming into the domination phase. The domination phase is easy. So once you dominate one of these areas, in this example, so red dominate this, he places his token here, his dominance token, and for the first dominance token you place, you get a victory point. Each player starts with 5 victory points, so in this case red will get a victory point. But in addition to that, red can use this action here, indicated by the icons, or either you can read it out from here if you have an English version which is available. Then you're going through this. If it's like here, 2 dice on it, then simply the more pips on the die representing who wins that. And if you have, for an example, in it like here, 1 and 4 and here's 6, in this case you add the pips on it. This is 5 and this is 6, so blue would dominate that and get the domination point for it here, 1 point, and is allowed to place this token down. Only the first token gives you an additional victory point over there. If you in the second round still have the domination in here, you get another token, but you don't get another victory point for this. However, each single die on that is taking this action in a numerical order, so starting with a 6, then a 4, and then a 1. This could be important, is not super important, but it could be important. And at the end of the game, at the end of round 3, you have another additional action phase. This is usually not happen in the other phases, which is an additional victory point gaining phase, and everybody who has control in these locations gets an additional victory point. After 3 rounds, the game is over, and then whoever has the most power over the city will win the game of Achaia. So, again, I don't want you to judge today about the game. However, I will give you a quick insight in this little game about my personal thoughts. But again, it shouldn't be very easy and quick this time, because I only have playtested it once, and that is far, far, far below my normal playtesting. So therefore, I cannot really judge on that game. What I really like on it is placing the dice with worker placing with dice. What I don't like is obviously that when you roll the dice, that the strength of your dice is usually determined by the number on the die. So a 6 is usually more powerful than a 1. This is in this game too, but you can re-roll it once, so you can take a mulligan. But okay, this is a part I don't like. However, you can always manipulate your dice and turn it to the opposite side or things like that with your intrigue cards. So even if rolling a die is not my favorite, and 3 ones, oh, that is really bad, is not my favorite. However, to manipulate the dice is negating a little bit of this luck involved in dice rolling a little bit, at least a little bit. What I also like is the fact that you can get never more than your usual 3 workers. You get another 4th and a 5th for the next round, but it's not like in other worker placement games. Gain more workers means you will immediately win the game. As you mentioned, you can see here, you can re-roll dice. So your first die roll is not as bad as it should be. This means you can add +1 or -1 to a die, and all these things happen with your dice and your bips on the dice. What I also like is that the money you get is not really a victory point thing. You use your money simply to bribe these characters out there, the characters in the city. So when you, for an example, try to use the power, you have to pay for this power, as I mentioned before here, and that means you don't really need too much money. You really need these cards, at least for my personal opinion. So these cards are more powerful than the money, even if money sounds like everybody needs money. But sometimes for money and according to the powers of the characters, you get more cards. So all of that is going into each other and using the effects from the other cards, which means it is really hard to play it with a Polish version instead of an English version, just to let you know. The quality of the game is really good, so the thickness of the tiles is really good. The dice are normal standard dice, however they feel really good and massive. Also the cardstock is okay, there's nothing on it. The cards are having a good quality as well. Yeah, that is again Achaia from RedImp Games, and sorry that I cannot really judge on the game, or I don't want to judge for you on the game. And again, that does not mean this game is bad or good. This game is just simply not tested enough to make a final judgment. That was Nils. Cyrils Brettspiele in a nutshell edition, and see you next time when I will have an English copy, for sure. Bye bye.